Hi everyone, my name is Lori Romano and I'm the Director of the Center for Academic Success and Transition, or CAST office here at UNL. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how to get organized for a semester. We're in a really strange time right now with our semester kind of beginning with a week of online classes that a lot of students have been telling me doesn't really feel like classes have started. And then next week, you're going to be transitioning into in-person classes with some very different looking schedules where classes may be partially online. You might have some classes that have fully gone online or, even in-person virtual hybrids. I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk today about how to get organized for a semester just in general, but then also maybe give a few tips of, what are some of the things that you should be looking for in order to make a really smooth transition this semester in particular. So this is a little something that we call a Sylly Party. We actually took this idea from one of our students who at the end of the first week of classes, she would gather the syllabi from every single class. She would gather her friends together, get a study room in the Learning Commons or some place that she and her friends could all spread out. They'd get a bunch of snacks. They would get some different highlighters or different colored pens and planners and computers, and they would sit there for a few hours and map out their entire semester. And they would put things on their planner. They would set reminders, due dates, and they would really get themselves organized right at the beginning. And, as a college student, it's now kind of the expectation that you are in charge of your education. You're in charge of setting your schedule. You're in charge of keeping yourself motivated. You're in charge of keeping yourself organized and staying on top of assignments. And this is really different when you're a first year student, because all the way through elementary and middle school and high school, your teachers were in charge, and maybe even your guidance counselor and your parents were kind of helping you, maintain that organization and hit those deadlines. So we're going to kind of dive in a little bit with how do we do this? How do we go through, have a little Sylly party of our own and get our semester all mapped out for ourselves. Really quickly, I want to tell you about our office. So I work in an office called the Center for Academic Success and Transition. We're really here to support all students at Nebraska, and our name kind of says it all. We're here for academic success. We want to help you with things like time management and study skills and test prep and reading and note-taking, even critical thinking. But we also want to help you with the transition. So not just from high school to college life, which is a big one. We want to help you transition all the way through your journey at Nebraska and then even transition into the world beyond. We know that every semester is different, every class is very different. As you move through the university, you're going to be going through a lot of different transitions. So we're kind of here to help with all of that. And we're here to really be a support network for you. And we like to say we're kind of your supporting cast. So to kind of switch gears and really dig into the organization, into the syllabus, the first, question that I like to ask students is just, do you even know what a syllabus is? Most of you have been to your first classes already this week, and I think professors have been spending some time actually going through the syllabi. But again, as a first generation student, I had no idea what this thing was until the professor kind of walked us through it in class. So the way that I like to describe it to students is this syllabus is really an outline and a guide of all the course info and the expectations. This is going to tell you exactly what your professor is looking for from you as a student, the things that you're going to be expected to do in order to get a good grade in the class, but also to retain the information, right? It's not just about getting a grade, it's about actually learning these things. The other way that I like to explain a syllabus is that it's really a roadmap. Your professor has mapped out the entire semester for you, and you're going to be able to see deadlines and due dates and the textbook that you should be purchasing or the materials. You'll be able to see how to contact your professor, what's their absence policy, all sorts of information. It can be a lot, and every course syllabus is going to look very different. And I think sometimes that's what throws students off a little bit, is there's no standard format. So every class is not only going to have a syllabus that looks different, but every professor is going to have very different expectations for the students. And so it's up to you to figure out what those are and kind of live up to those throughout the semester. So we talk a lot with students about what to look for, right? There's certain bits of information that are like really important to be able to find in your syllabus. So what I do is I encourage students to maybe grab a highlighter, and you can actually go through and highlight or underline on the syllabus itself. But then our office has actually come up with a really great resource called a Sylly Matrix. The things that you really need to be looking for in your syllabi are, number one, the contact information and office hours for your professors. You've got to be able to to know how to get in touch with them. Some professors prefer phone calls, some prefer email, some might give you a number to text, but their preferred method of contact is going to be how you should be reaching out to them. So make sure you know that. The other thing that I like to talk to first-year students about is office hours. This is something that maybe you haven't heard of before. Office hours are literally hours where your professors have set aside for you to go and meet with them and ask questions. And there are faculty and professors on this campus that have never seen a student in office hours. And that's crazy. Your professor setting aside time for you is one of the best resources you have for your courses. So look for the professor's office hours, look to see if they have any details like, hey, my door is going to be closed, but please knock. Hey, send me an email or a text to let me know you're coming that day. Whatever your individual professors have set up for their office hours, make sure you follow it, but go to office hours. I lived in office hours as a student, and I ended up getting some pretty good grades in the classes where I did that. The next thing you want to look for is deadlines and due dates. You want to look for those, big assignments, the projects and the papers and the big quizzes and tests and exams that are worth a lot of points. And you want to mark those down. You've got to be able to see what those deadlines are way ahead of time so you can plan. You want to look for textbook info and reading requirements. I'm going to tell you now, college students don't read enough, or they think that reading is optional. Reading is not optional. If there is a textbook listed in the syllabus, you are expected to purchase or rent the textbook, and you are expected to read it and read all the assignments. Don't just skim. Don't just think that you're going to go to the lecture and just not really buy or, pay attention to the textbook. If the textbook is listed in the syllabus, you need to get it and you need to do the reading. You want to look for grading and absence policies. And again, these are very different from professor to professor and course to course. Some professors, if the course doesn't meet a lot, if it meets maybe once a week, you might only be able to have one absence all semester, and then your grade starts dropping. I would suggest going to class every single time because you are literally lighting money on fire when you don't go to class. But you need to make sure what that absence policy is. You also need to make sure what the policy is now in the time of COVID, because things have changed a little bit. If you are ill or if you are feeling like maybe you shouldn't go to class, maybe you've been exposed to COVID, look to see if your professors have Zoom links or if they have, different options, but you need to be in touch and in contact with your professors. The other thing that you should be looking for is the grading policy. This gets really confusing for students because, again, you're kind of used to what happened in high school with grades. In college, extra credit is not always a thing. Just showing up for class is not always a thing. Some professors, your entire grade might depend on 2 big exams, and that's it. Other classes, it might be spread out. So quizzes are worth a certain amount of points. Exams are worth a certain amount of points. You've got papers. You've got a little bit of extra credit, you've got attendance, participation points, whatever. You need to know what those policies are for every class so you can make sure that you're doing the work needed to get a good grade. Definitely look for exam info. Make sure you know when all of your tests are, but also where are they located? Here at the university, we have something called the Digital Learning Center, which is over in the Adele Correal Hall Learning Commons. This is kind of a big computer lab where students can go and take their exams online. And a lot of students get confused. You're not just showing up to your regular classroom. You actually have to schedule this, and then you have to show up at your scheduled time to take that exam. And then there are rules for what you can actually bring into the testing center with you. So it's like you have to do all of this work ahead of time to prepare yourself to even just take an exam. So you've got to make sure that you know that. And then the last thing that a syllabus should have is some sort of a course schedule or calendar. And this is what, lays out what you're going to be expected to do every single week or how to prepare for every single class. So it might incorporate what your homework assignments are. It might incorporate what your reading is for each class or for each week. It might be some of the smaller assignments or things that you have to submit, after class that day or something like that. So you want to look for that calendar to make sure that you are getting all of the points possible for your class. I want to show you a couple of examples. These are syllabi from when I was a student. So, obviously you may not have some right now that look exactly like this, but I like to put a couple of syllabi side by side just to show students how different they can look and also what to look for when you're looking for that course schedule. What you're seeing on the screen right now is a copy of what my English 101 course syllabus looked like. And the professor for this course was actually I thought, pretty brilliant in the way she laid it out. Everything in the entire syllabus was really clear. It was clearly marked. But when we got to the course calendar, what she explained to us is that the date that you see is the date of class, like when the class actually meets. The activity is what we're doing in class. And the assignment is the assignment that I should have completed before I show up to class. Okay. And this is where college students, the first couple of weeks are really confusing because professors, they've expected that you've read the chapter by the time you show up for the lecture. And this is something that, unless somebody tells you, you just don't know how to do, or, you're not expecting. But if you just show up to a lecture without having read anything, you might be sitting there wondering what the heck the professor is even talking about. But if you've read the chapter and you have a little bit of an idea, then you can actually ask questions and participate in a discussion. And, the lecture itself is going to make a whole lot more sense. So, for this course calendar, what this professor did was, the abbreviations, like the PR was the book that we had to read, Patterns of Reflection, right? So on September 2nd, by the time I showed up to class that day, I should have read pages 1 through 13. I should have already done that, already read it, because that's what we were discussing in class that day. She explained it to us during syllabus week in class, and then I knew for the rest of the semester, that's what I needed to do. So the second syllabus, this was what the course calendar looked like. And all it has is just a date, like January 28th, and a word next to it, Aristotle. That was it. And this was actually the same professor, but this was like her senior level class. So by senior year, she assumes that we all know how to read a syllabus. We know what it's talking about. We know how to navigate it. There was one book for this class. And if I looked in that book's table of contents, what I would see is that, okay, Aristotle starts on page 38 and there's this whole section. So by the time I show up to class on January 28th, I should have read that entire chapter of the book. So again, this professor, she knew that she was dealing with senior level students. We had all been in college for a few years. We understood course syllabi. She didn't have to lay it out for us in detail. She expected us to know. Now, here's the thing. There are some first year students that end up in a class with a syllabus that looks like this, and it's super confusing. If you don't understand, right? If there's anything in that syllabus that you're unsure of, you aren't quite getting, ask your professor. Okay, that's what office hours are for. That's what, being able to contact them with contact info or send them messages through Canvas, that's what that's for. You need to understand the expectations of you to be able to do the work that you need to do for class and live up to that professor's expectations. So do not be afraid to ask. So what we've created is this document called a Sylly Matrix, okay? And this is sort of what a Sylly Matrix looks like when it's filled out. Each of the columns that you see is a class. And what we did is we, again, put those categories of information that you need to look for, and we left a little bit of space for you to jot it down or write it in. Now, we know that this is like a one-page worksheet, and some people look at this and they're like, my handwriting's too big. I can't fit all that information. That's fine. Type it into an Excel doc or a Word doc, or jot it, on notebook paper or whatever, or even just highlight it in your syllabus. But these are the things that you need to look through your syllabus and find. So getting organized for the semester is not just filling out the Sylly Matrix. That'd be way too easy. What you need to do is then take that information and plan. The other part of this that we talk to students about is time management. And our office gives a whole workshop on time management because that's a topic all of itself. But I'm going to give you a couple really quick bullet points today to kind of get you started thinking about it. Because if you can get a handle on your time and map out a really good schedule for yourself, you are going to be much less stressed this semester. I guarantee it. So what we encourage students to do is use a planner. Whether it's an actual paper planner or it's something, digital, like a Google Calendar, or even if you go in and you use the calendar in Canvas, that's great. But you have to be in charge of entering things in. So what we want a planner to have is calendar pages where you can see an entire month at a glance. That's really important for long-term planning. We want you to have a weekly schedule. So this is where you kind of map out a routine for yourself. And then the last thing is you need to get in the habit of making daily to-do lists for yourself. A lot of students make the mistake of the beginning of the semester. They think they can keep it all in their head, and it'll work for a week or two when things aren't super busy. But once you start getting a lot more assignments and things to do in your classes, and you're getting involved in clubs and you have a job and all these things, all of a sudden your brain is just not going to hold that much information. So you need to be able to write things down and check it off a list. So first things first, I'm a big fan of paper calendars because your brain just processes information differently when you write it down. But a calendar page, really what you're doing is your long-term planning. And when you sit down with those syllabi, you can actually plan your entire semester. One of the first things that you want to do is put down big deadlines, due dates, exams, all of that stuff on a calendar page. And the reason for this is you can look at an entire month, like I could flip to September and I can see everything coming at me for the whole month. And I can see the fact that maybe that second week, I've got a big research paper due and I've got an exam, like back to back on days. Or what you might notice in college is you're going to have a week where it's like every class you have is having an exam. You've got to be able to prepare for that ahead of time, right? And not panic and forget about one of them. So the calendar pages give you like a really quick at a glance of everything coming. When you dial this down just a little bit and narrow your focus, then we're talking about like weekly planning. And this is getting into a routine, getting into a study schedule. This is probably my most favorite activity to do with students. Humans, we are creatures of habit. Kindergarten through 12th grade, you had a very set routine for school where you went to school at about 7:30 in the morning and you were done at about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And all of your academic work and your thinking and, all of that was done within those hours. So if you set up a schedule for yourself where you have classes and study hours and all of those things between the hours of about 8 in the morning until about 3:30 in the afternoon, you're actually going to be more efficient at studying. Students that really waste a lot of time in between classes during the day and then try to cram and do a bunch of reading and homework and whatever late at night, it generally doesn't go well. So what we want you to do is map out the hours that you're in class, put your classes on this sheet first, and then for every credit hour you're taking, you should be spending a minimum of 2 hours outside of class studying. So that's why you see a lot of those like blue study hours here. So this student is taking about 15 credit hours. And if you would go through and actually count up all those blue spaces, right, where they're studying or they're going to office hours or they're in a study group or getting tutoring, whatever, you're actually going to see between like 35 and 40 study hours. It's going to kind of vary from class to class. I was an English major, so all of my English classes were like pretty easy for me. I could read pretty easily, my paper writing, I could get that done pretty quickly. I'm terrible at math. If I had math on my schedule, I was going to be putting in more study hours. I was going to need to go to office hours, need to go to tutoring, and just need to spend more time on my homework. The minimum, if you're taking 15 credit hours this semester, you should have 30 hours of study set aside every week. And then the last thing is we want you to have a planner, right? And the daily to-do list pages in a planner are really, really important because this is where you keep the details. This is where, yes, you're going to write down if a paper is due that day or you have to turn something in or you have to take a test, but this is also where like the little stuff lives. So if you've got to do a reading or a short homework assignment or turn something in, or your professor mentioned in class that you need to go visit the writing center for your paper, or you scheduled to go to office hours with your professor, or you scheduled an appointment with my office, write those things down. And then the whole point of a daily to-do list is I have to do these things before I go to bed tonight. And during those study hours that you've already kind of mapped out for your week, this is what you're doing. This is kind of your checklist of items to get through. I also encourage students to write down things like doing laundry or having lunch with a friend, or I need to pay my phone bill or my phone's going to get turned off, like kind of the mundane, day-to-day stuff, because it feels really good to cross something off a list. And if you start to struggle with your motivation, if you can make yourself a list of what you've got to get done that day, and you can motivate yourself enough just to start the first thing, something cool happens because you get that first thing done. You get this little burst of adrenaline, cross it off the list, and you're like, you know what, I can do the next one. And you get the next thing done. And before you know it, you've crossed everything off your list. And if you're lucky, you have some time left over. Like you've actually, gotten things done pretty efficiently and you've got some like free time that day if you want to binge watch Netflix. What do I want to see you do when you leave here today? Number one, get those syllabi for every class. Go through and either fill out the Sylly Matrix or start highlighting some of that information that you need to know, all of those important things. Reach out to your professors if something is unclear. If you're not understanding the reading schedule, if there's some problem with the textbook for the class, whatever it is, if there is something that is unclear or you're having issues with, reach out now while it's early. The next thing is get a planner. get a planner and use it. They definitely have some for sale in the bookstore. They're on Amazon. If you want to use a paper planner, there are a lot of different options. If you want to go digital, that's fine, but make sure that it is going to be something that you are checking like constantly. Okay. Get in the habit of really look at the big calendar pages, and then make yourself that daily to-do list. Make sure you are doing something where you're writing down what you have to accomplish every day, checking it off when it's done, making sure that nothing is falling through the cracks. And then the last thing, I'm telling you, good time management, it will change your life. Map out that study schedule. If you can get into a good routine, you will be getting everything done, and I guarantee you will have free time left over for all the fun stuff that's going to happen in college. This is a brand new semester. There are a lot of different things happening, a lot of changes that have taken place over the last 6 months. We're all trying some very new things. Some are going to work really well, some are not. And failure is only a bad word if you let it stop you or if you quit. But if you learn from the experience and you try again, that's the whole point of it all. So experiment, fail, learn, repeat, and you're going to rock this college thing.